let's get back to some of the answers. Anita said, I agree with Paul. I'll add that roadmap helps the team across the organization to make sure they are aligned with each other and with the strategy. Back to the strategy concept there. I also believe the roadmap can be something that gets the teams excited and mentally prepared, something valuable to look forward to and to be part of. Give them that, here's where we're going. You want to go to the moon, we're going to the moon. Look what's coming. Greg, you added in, there's no one roadmap. There are multiple roadmaps that eventually brought together at the executive level, with the product roadmap focused on a specific area of the business. These can include product, technology, marketing, HR, sales, finance, etc. The exercise of creating a roadmap requires the team to focus. The thought process and the relationships are important. Roadmaps are boiled up to the executive level, where they can validate all of the teams are working toward the same direction. And product and technology can be boiled down to a roadmap that could be shown to customers. Let me ask you, especially at large.
Sounds great.
Yeah, great answer. If you can do it, talk to me about that alignment issue, right? If we're trying to get multiple teams aligning around it, often I look at road mapping from a lens of, product, with a product management organization, but you start aligning all these different aspects across the different organizations. I'd love to get your take on, how you do that.
Yeah, so that is where is the beginning of all of that? So what's the beginning? So the beginning is actually, what are the teams going to be working towards? What's the business goals? Where are we trying to go? That's the beginning. And now you're actually boiling all those down. So, you pick marketing. Marketing is going to be very tied to the now, right? What is now? What's definitive on the roadmap? But they have a lot of other work that they need to do. So what are the other underlying things that they have to do to be more effective? You mentioned like SEO. You mean, how do I get, new channels in digital marketing? How do I do all these things?
Knowing that something's coming down the road that we need to have access to, how do I build our capability or access?
Right. So those thought processes that, let alone like the features that are going to come out, but those thought processes of what do we need to strategically work on? Those things that they need to like think about that and actually put it down into some type of document, roadmap, whatever, so that now all the executives can now bring these things together. HR is going to change their systems. Okay, is that going to make it better for people? Technology guys are going to be working on some underlying technology work that has to be done that may not boil up into a product feature roadmap.
Yeah,
that's okay. That's great. Those are priorities. So all of those things need to boil up. And now, the executives can now look at all of these and, showcase that, yes, we are all working towards our 4 goals for the business or whatever. Just make sure that everybody's working. Let's not talk about the CFOs, but having that process of thinking, like, what are we doing now? What are my dependencies on other teams? What are we thinking about doing next and next and next across the board? Those are actually very valuable things that teams need to work on.
And obviously, you used to say this coming from a pretty big company background, right?
Right.
It's interesting to look at the different. Jason, I'm going to pivot to your answers. You said and Jason got philosophical on us. It was a chicken and egg answer. It's an interesting paradigm. What came first, the prospect or customer asking for the roadmap, or the salesperson showing it to them? In many business reviews and sales deals, the roadmap is a required artifact, primarily with the former. In SaaS software and perhaps other models, customers are trained that the investment they're making is due in part to what is coming in the future development versus what is already available. To stay competitive, I find that you cannot be the one software business that is not showing the roadmap. Jason, I would like your take on answering your paradigm question. Which do you think came first, the customer asking for it or the salesperson offering it?
I think the salesperson offering it.
Greg, you agree?
I agree with that.
Steve, any salesperson routes on them offering the roadmap?
I'm actually going to go the other way. I've mostly managed pretty complex products that have a long implementation cycle and a long cycle until they're replaced. So it's actually quite reasonable for, a large company that's getting ready to make a 5 or 6 or 7 year commitment to say, where are you going? But it's not, I would have to agree with Greg and Jason on, I think salespeople use it as, oh yeah, we don't have that fee. We don't have single sign-on yet, but we have it on the roadmap. It's going to be out in Thursday next week around 6:30. But my clients would ask me, are you going cloud or are you going Unix? Where do you see yourself 3 years from now? Because we want to be on board. And in this one particular case I'm thinking of, I held a customer advisory board around the roadmap, but I called some of my biggest customers together and said, I'll share my roadmap if you'll share yours. And they were like, here's our 3-year, 5-year, 7-year plan as we become more distributed, or we become more isolated, or we become more something or another, and then I would share, where we were going. And the danger was that we could very well be going, one way while they're going another way. But in my experience, that process gave me a lot of insight. And the salespeople hated it because they're like, I want to bring my prospects in here. I'm like, why would you do that? It makes no sense. And then there was one, just since you wanted me to make a sales rant, it was so funny. I had some of the biggest names in the industry in this meeting with me. And every time we took a break, you could see all the sales guys were all hanging around outside looking in, because it's their biggest customers. I get that. And, as soon as we broke for lunch, the sales guys are like, are you guys almost done in here? Because I want to take you to, a martini lunch. And they're like, dude, we're here to work with Steve on defining the future of the product. We're not interested in going to a strip club right now. And the salespeople just could not comprehend it. It's like, they're not here to party. They're here to give me their advice. So I chose who was in the customer advisory board with very limited input from the sales team.
I've heard stories of people using the customer advisory board. They say, here are the 5 things that we're committed to work on this year. You guys, you have an hour as a customer advisory board. We're going to leave. You give us a list of prioritization, which I thought was a good factor. A couple other things. Steve, let's be honest. When you were doing it, it wasn't called cloud. It was called ASP, application service provider, right? Because cloud
Maybe
is
so.
fairly new.
I've been doing a fair amount of contracting and consulting.
Yes, I know.
I'm up to date on what you kids are talking about.
Now, I tend to be of the school of Steve, partly because I am from the school of Steve. And, he always told the great story of, if I'm going to go to Boston, right, people need to know the direction you're going, where you expect it to be. The question for me, and this is a hypothetical, I don't think we'll go into it, maybe we'll get it later with one of the questions, is when is that the role of strategy and executive leadership for setting the vision for the company versus the roadmap setting it as a 3-year out, right? You talk about executive brief, you talk about bringing people on, you think about executive briefing room. I want my CEO or my head of whatever to be able to say, we are a cloud future company who are focused on improving, creating efficiencies in the purchasing supply chain, whatever it may be. That should give people what they need from that. You shouldn't have to put it in. Jason, you've been very quiet. This was even your comment. I'd love to get.
Hang on, before we go there, and because I have to pop out, but absolutely, I think that executives are so busy being salespeople and project managers and product managers and marketing people that they have neglected their strategic role of telling us who we are and where we're going. So in my experience, the senior most people I've worked with are more COOs than CEOs, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And I think in many cases, the product managers are trying to guess the strategy. So here's my roadmap based on what I think the strategy is. Do you think that's what the strategy is? And, the leadership team goes, oh, that seems like a perfectly good strategy. And, bottom up strategy kind of makes sense, but somebody's got to do it. And I don't see a lot of strategic thinking in a lot of the teams that I work with. But
it's got to be customer back.
I'm going to fling that on the table and let Jason talk. So it was lovely to see you all again. I'll see you next week.